My parent kicked me out in 11th grade for being pregnant. Vankto years later, they showed up. Let us see the child. When I opened the door, but what they heard shocked them. What child? What are you? My father, Joseph, sat across from me in my penthouse. The one I designed, the one I paid for. His eyes were cold. We've been patient, Claire. $10 million. My mother, Cynthia, sat beside him nodding. Or we tell the entire world about the grandchild you've been hiding from us for 22 years. The ultimatum hung in the air thick and toxic. They thought they had me. They thought I was still that scared girl they threw away. I calmly picked up my glass of water. I took a slow sip. I set the glass down on the marble coaster, and the sound was the only thing in the room. I looked them both in the eye. What child? Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. It's funny the things you remember. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember the smell of the air. It was that damp, cold Portland night 22 years ago. I was 17. I stood in that same living room, the one they just tried to threaten me in. But back then, it felt massive, and I felt so small. I was holding a small white plastic stick, 2 pink lines. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. I whispered it. Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant. Silence. My mother, Cynthia, didn't even look up from her wine glass. She just stared at the wall. My father, Joseph, slowly put down his real estate section of the newspaper. He looked at me, but not at me. He looked at me like I was a bad investment, a deal that had just collapsed. His first words weren't, "Are you okay?" They weren't who they were. "You've ruined us." I tried to speak to explain, but he cut me off. Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation? We have the Hamiltons over for dinner next week. How am I supposed to explain this? Explain to me. Cynthia finally spoke, her voice like ice. You heard your father. This is an embarrassment. She stood up, walked to her purse, and pulled out 2 $100 bills. She didn't hand them to me. She threw them on the coffee table. Go take care of it, she said. Take care of it, I whispered, looking at the money. What does that mean? It means you are not keeping it, Joseph said, his voice flat. And you are not staying here. I couldn't breathe. What do you mean, Dad? Where am I supposed to go? He walked to the hall closet, pulled out my high school backpack, and tossed it at my feet. I don't care. But you will not embarrass this family. Go stay with a friend. Go stay with him. Him was Trevor, my boyfriend, the one who had sworn he loved me. I tried to call him from the sidewalk, my breath fogging in the cold night air. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I left a message sobbing. Trevor, please. They kicked me out. I don't know where to go. Please call me. He never called back. The door to my childhood home locked behind me. I heard the deadbolt slide shut. $200 in my pocket and a life growing inside me that my entire world wanted to erase. That first night, I slept at a bus stop. I told myself it was just for one night, that in the morning Trevor would call or my parents would realize what they'd done and open the door. One night turned into a week. The $200 ran out faster than I could have imagined. A few nights in a cheap motel, a few meals, and then nothing. The hunger was the worst part. It wasn't just a feeling. It was an emptiness that swallowed everything else. I started to understand the geography of the city in a new way. Which dumpsters behind which restaurants were the least disgusting? Which park benches were hidden from the police patrols? I was invisible. People walked past me, their eyes sliding right over the girl, huddled in a doorway pretending I wasn't there. It was easier for them. The cold was constant, that wet Portland cold that seeps into your bones. I learned to sleep in layers, my backpack as a pillow, my hands tucked into my armpits for warmth. And through it all, I talked to the tiny life inside me. I'm sorry, I'd whisper my hand on my stomach. I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I promise. But I was 17, and I was alone, and I was breaking. The hunger eventually faded. It was replaced by a dull, aching exhaustion. I was 2 months into this nightmare, and I was sitting in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room of a free clinic. I knew something was wrong. When the doctor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, finally told me the words, I just nodded. There was no pregnancy anymore. The cold, the hunger, the stress, my body had made the choice for me. I walked out of that clinic, and I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing. That was the most terrifying part. The girl who used to cry over commercials was gone. The person left was just a shell, hollowed out and empty. I stopped trying. I found an alley behind a bakery in a nicer part of town. It smelled like yeast and sugar, and it was warm from the exhaust vents. I curled up there not to sleep, but just to stop. That's where she found me. I heard a door open. I didn't look up. I just braced for someone to tell me to leave. You can't sleep here, honey. Her voice was firm, but not mean. I looked up. She was an older woman, maybe in her late 50s, with flour dusting her apron and the kindest eyes I had seen since, well, in a long time. Her name tag read, Patricia. I'm not sleeping, I mumbled. I'm just tired. She looked at me for a long time. She saw the chapped lips, the hollow cheeks, the emptiness in my eyes. She didn't offer me money. She didn't offer me pity. She pointed with her chin back toward the bakery. I need someone to wash dishes, and my delivery driver just quit. It pays minimum wage. And there's a small room above the shop. It's not much, but it's warm. I just stared at her. Well, she said, are you coming or not? That was Patricia Mayhew. She didn't just save my life. She gave me one. I took the job. I took the room. The first few weeks I barely spoke. I just worked. I washed dishes until my hands were raw. I learned the delivery routes. I scrubbed floors. Patricia left me alone. She'd leave a tray of food outside my door at night. She never asked about my past. She never asked where I came from. This is where I have to explain something. People who've never been through that kind of trauma, they think you just get over it. You don't. That kind of abandonment, that kind of loss, it rewires you. It's the invisible chain of a survivor. Even in that warm room, even with food in my stomach, I was still a prisoner. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding, convinced I was back on the street. The trauma becomes a prison without bars. You learn to survive by becoming invisible, by expecting nothing, by trusting no one. You learn that hope is dangerous. I was safe, but I wasn't free. That part of me, the part that was cold and watchful and always waiting for the next betrayal, it never went away. It just got quieter. And Patricia, she seemed to understand that. One night, she found me in the kitchen, after closing, just staring at the wall. The girl you were is gone, she said, softly sitting across from me. She's not coming back. The question is, who are you going to build in her place? She didn't just teach me how to bake bread. She taught me how to run a business. She showed me the ledgers, the inventory, the payroll, the profit margins. She taught me strategy. Never let them see you're scared, Claire, she'd say, and never, ever let them know what you're really thinking. I learned. I watched. I saved every penny. And that cold, hollow part of me, it started to fill up with something else. Not hope. Resolve. 22 years. That's how long it takes to build a new life from the ashes of an old one. I didn't just learn about bread from Patricia. I learned about supply chains. I learned about payroll. I learned that business wasn't just about profit. It was about power. It was about building a fortress around yourself so strong that no one could ever throw you out into the cold again. I went to school at night, got my degree in architecture. I took every lesson Patricia taught me about business and applied it to my own passion, sustainable design. I launched Reading designs from a laptop in that same attic room above the bakery. My first client was a small coffee shop. My second was a community center. Now, 22 years later, Reading Designs is one of the top sustainable architecture firms in the Pacific Northwest. We don't just build buildings. We design ecosystems. We build structures that breathe, that give back more than they take. My name is on buildings that will stand long after I'm gone. I built a fortress. And then after 22 years of silence, the barbarians showed up at the gate. It came on a Tuesday. An email, simple and nauseating. The sender, Joseph Redding. The subject, thinking of you. I read the words, Claire, your mother, and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We've missed you. We know we made mistakes, and we would give anything to heal our family. Can we talk? I read it 3 times. The old me, the girl from the alley, would have cried. She would have seen the words "we miss you" and mistakes and felt that dangerous, toxic flicker of hope. But that girl is long gone. The woman reading that email felt nothing but the cold, sharp click of a lock falling into place. They didn't miss me. They wanted something. I didn't reply. Instead, I made 2 calls. My first call was to Charlie Klein. Charlie, I said, I'm forwarding you an email. I need you to review my personal and corporate firewalls. I want to know every legal angle they could possibly be looking at. Charlie's been my lawyer for a decade. He's not the kind of lawyer who argues. He's the kind who ensures you never have to. On it, Claire, was all he said. My second call was to Caitlin. Kate. She's a private intelligence investigator. She finds things people don't want found. Kate, I said, I'm sending you 2 names, Joseph and Cynthia Redding. I want to know everything. Bank accounts, debts, investments, recent communications. I don't want to know what they say they want. I want to know what they really want. Kate just laughed. This sounds fun. Give me 48 hours. I closed the email. They wanted to heal the family. They thought they were dealing with a lost little girl they could manipulate with a few empty words. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea I was the one who had been building the trap all along. Kate didn't even need the full 48 hours. She called me the next evening. You were right, Claire. They don't want to heal. They want a bailout. I listened to my pen tapping softly on my desk as she laid it all out. Joseph and Cynthia Redding were ruined. A series of bad real estate investments leveraged to the hilt had collapsed. They were facing foreclosure on their own home. They're broke, Claire Kate said. But here's the kicker. They don't know you lost the baby. I went cold. What? They've been doing their own digging. They found a social media post from an old high school acquaintance mentioning you were pregnant. But they never found a record of a loss. So they've built this entire fantasy that you gave the baby up for adoption, or worse, that you've been hiding him all these years. It all clicked into place. the fake concern, the sudden reappearance. What's their plan, Kate? The $10 million question. Literally. They've been consulting with a bottom-feeder lawyer. Their plan is to show up demand to see their grandchild, and when you refuse, they'll threaten to file a massive lawsuit for $10 million in emotional damages and parental alienation. They think you'll pay them to keep it quiet, to protect your reputation. So that was it. The child they forced me to lose in the cold was now just a ghost they were trying to sell. Thank you, Kate. Send me the full file. I hung up and sat in silence. They weren't just greedy. They were ghouls picking at a grave they themselves had dug. The next pawn in their game arrived 2 days later. My assistant buzzed me. Claire, there's a Mr. Trevor here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal. Trevor. After 22 years, send him in. He walked into my office, looking small. The golden boy confidence was gone, replaced by the nervous energy of a man who was clearly in over his head. Claire, he said, trying for a charming smile, you look incredible. What do you want, Trevor? He flinched at my tone. I know it's been a long time. But I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we lost. We didn't lose anything, Trevor. You left. I survived. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Look, your parents reached out to me. And it got me thinking about our child. There it was. The rehearsed line, the emotional bait. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city I had built my life in. I don't know what you're talking about. Claire, please, he said, his voice cracking with fake emotion. Don't. I have a right to know, after all these years, is it a boy, a girl? I turned to face him. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. You lost your rights when you let your voicemail pick up while I was sobbing on a sidewalk? You're a tool, Trevor. They're using you just like they tried to use me. Now get out of my office. He left pale and shaken. He hadn't realized I wasn't the same girl he'd abandoned. The final move came that Friday. A formal letter from their lawyer delivered by courier. It laid out all their baseless claims, all their fabricated pain, and the demand, a private settlement of $10 million to avoid a painful public lawsuit regarding the rights to your son. They had finally put their threat in writing. They thought they had cornered me. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call Charlie. I didn't call Kate. I called the one number I had sworn I would never dial again, my father's. He picked up on the first ring, his voice smug, expectant. Joseph Redding. I received your lawyer's letter, I said. Ah, Claire. Good. Then you know we're serious. This doesn't have to be ugly. I agree, I said. I'm not going to discuss my child or $10 million over the phone. You want to talk? Let's talk. My penthouse. Tuesday, 5 p.m. I could hear the smile in his voice. We'll be there. He hung up thinking he'd won. He didn't realize he had just accepted an invitation to his own execution, and so they were there, sitting on my custom-designed sofa, looking completely out of place in a world I had built without them. We've been patient, Claire Joseph said, trying to sound reasonable like a businessman closing a deal. $10 million. My mother Cynthia knotted her pearls tight against her throat. Or we tell the entire world about the grandchild you've been hiding from us for 22 years. The ultimatum hung in the air, thick and toxic. They thought they had me. They thought I was still that scared girl they threw away. I calmly picked up my glass of water. I took a slow sip, I set the glass down on the marble coaster, and the sound was the only thing in the room. I looked them both in the eye. What child? Cynthia actually laughed, a short, nervous sound. Don't play games, Claire. The boy. Your son. I'm not playing games, I said. My voice was quiet. It was the quietest thing in the room, but it was the heaviest. I'm asking you a simple question. What child are you talking about? The baby Joseph snapped, his patience breaking. The one you had when you ran away. The one you gave up. Our grandchild. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The Portland skyline glittered below me. My fortress. There is no child, I said, looking at their reflections in the glass. We know he exists, Cynthia cried, standing up. We know you've been hiding him. I turned to face them, and for the first time I let them see the person I had become, the ice. The baby I was pregnant with when you threw me out died 22 years ago. In a free clinic on the east side, he didn't even have a name. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of their entire strategy collapsing. Cynthia's face went white. Joseph, he just stared, speechless. They hadn't planned for this. The truth was the one thing they had never considered. But, Joseph stammered, the lawsuit, why would you? Why would I cut him off? You know, for a moment I almost believed you, that maybe after 2 decades you felt a flicker of remorse, but you and I know that's not why you're here. They looked confused. They were still 2 steps behind. You're not here for a child, I said. I picked up a remote from the coffee table and pointed it at the far wall. What they thought was a piece of modern art slid away, revealing a massive 80-inch screen. You're here for this. I pressed the button. The screen lit up. Not with family photos, but with bank statements. Foreclosure notices on their house. A list of failed investments. A dizzying sea of red numbers. You're broke, I stated. Cynthia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. And you're not here for a child, I continued, pressing another button. You're here for $10 million. The screen changed. Now it was their emails, their texts, the entire pathetic thread between them and Trevor plotting. The demand for $10 million. The plan to use a child that didn't even exist as a weapon. You didn't come here to heal, I said, my voice rising not with anger but with something colder. You came here to extort me. You came here to my home to sell the ghost of a baby you murdered 22 years ago? Joseph was on his feet. This is illegal. You spied on us. Yes, I said. I did. I learned from the best. You taught me that reputation is everything. You just never thought I'd be the one to control yours. The intercom buzzed. I pressed the button. Send them in. The penthouse door opened, and Charles and Kate walked in. Charlie, in his perfect suit, held a set of legal documents. Kate just smiled. Joseph and Cynthia Redding Charlie, said his voice pleasant. You are hereby served with a temporary restraining order. You are to have no further contact with my client, Claire Redding, her business, or her associates. Kate handed them the papers. Cynthia was sobbing now, messy, ugly tears. Claire, please, we're your family. No, I said. You're not. Family doesn't do this. I walked to my door and held it open. Leave. Now. They stumbled out, Joseph dragging Cynthia by the arm. Not powerful real estate investors, just 2 old, greedy, defeated people. As the door closed, I leaned against it, the adrenaline finally fading. I watched their small figures get into the elevator. And I didn't feel hatred. I didn't even feel satisfied. I just felt free. I had spent years wrestling with that word, family. People tell you that blood is everything, that you have to forgive, that you have to keep trying, that you owe them something. But I've learned that's a lie. It's a lie told by toxic people to keep you trapped. Letting go of your bloodline isn't an act of betrayal. It's an act of survival. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep people warm who have only ever given you ashes. Letting them go, really letting them go, wasn't about them at all. It was about finally, after 22 years, finding myself. The fallout was immediate. Kate's evidence, combined with Charles's legal filings, painted a picture so damning that Joseph and Cynthia didn't just lose their social standing. They were erased. Their friends disappeared. Their remaining credit lines were frozen. The story of their failed extortion attempt, built on the grave of a child they'd abandoned, became a quiet, vicious rumor in the Portland circles they once tried to dominate. But I didn't watch them fall. I wasn't interested in their destruction. I was only ever interested in my own construction. 6 months later, I stood on the steps of a newly renovated building not far from Patricia's bakery. The sign above the door didn't say Redding Designs. It said the Patricia Mayhew Foundation. I used the profits from the fortress I'd built to create a sanctuary. It's a place that offers what I never had housing for pregnant teens who have nowhere to go: childcare, job training, legal aid. My parents taught me that justice was about punishment. But Patricia, she taught me that true justice is about building. I've learned there are two kinds of justice in this world. There's the justice of punishment, which is always looking backward. It's about settling old scores, about making someone pay for what they did. It's loud, and it feels good for a moment, but it leaves you empty. Then there's the justice of the sower. That kind of justice looks forward. It's not about tearing down. It's about building something new. It's about planting a seed of healing in the same ground where you were buried. My parents' downfall wasn't my victory. My victory is this place. My victory is the sound of laughter in these hallways, the sight of young women holding their babies, knowing they will never have to choose between their child and a place to sleep. This foundation, this is my real empire. This is the thing I built that they can never ever touch. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your self-worth? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in turning pain into power, hit like and subscribe.